Executive Privileges, Chapter 4, Housewife Auditions. Part 1. The flight home from the conference was quiet, but the silence between Ling and Orm was heavy with unspoken tension. Ling sat rigidly, hands clasped in her lap, while Orm reviewed the itinerary for the next week, calm, composed, every movement deliberate. Ling's chest tightened as she watched her. She had spent the conference maintaining a professional front, carefully compartmentalizing the events of the suite and the moments they had shared. Yet, every time Orm looked up with that faint, teasing smile, Ling felt herself unraveling slightly, a thread at a time. Orm's fingers brushed the edge of the schedule casually, almost accidentally, but Ling felt the spark anyway. It was infuriating. She hated that Orm could command her attention without even touching her. "You were remarkable at the panel today," Ling said finally, voice low, almost grudging. Orm tilted her head, a faint smile teasing her lips. "Thank you, Ms. Ling. You were attentive." Ling's jaw clenched. She hated the subtle dominance in Orm's tone, the way she could flatter and tease simultaneously without losing an ounce of composure. Orm had learned quickly how to navigate Ling's moods, how to draw attention, and most importantly, how to provoke desire without overstepping boundaries. By the time they reached Ling's penthouse, the tension was taut, palpable. Orm carried her luggage quietly, placing it in the designated area with meticulous care. Ling watched, aware of every movement, every glance, every subtle indication that Orm had already taken a firm place in her world. "You know," Ling began cautiously, "you're not required to—" Orm cut her off softly, calm, confident. "I know, but I want to." Ling froze. Her hands tightened slightly, fingers brushing against the counter as she fought to maintain control. Orm had already crossed a boundary without a single overt act. She wanted to serve. She wanted to be present. She wanted to test the limits of Ling's authority and claim her space in ways that were subtle yet entirely deliberate. "You're insufferable," Ling muttered, echoing the words she had spoken in the hotel suite. "And you can't resist noticing," Orm replied softly, a faint curve of amusement in her expression. Over the next few days, Orm began small. She prepared Ling's morning coffee just the way she liked it, arranging the tray neatly with the croissant and fruit on one side, coffee on the other. She anticipated every need, every preference without being asked. She tidied the apartment quietly, cleaned Ling's office files, and organized the schedules with precision. Ling found herself observing Orm more than she expected. Every motion, every meticulous gesture, every faint smile as Orm anticipated her preferences, it was infuriating and captivating all at once. She hated how easily Orm had integrated herself into her daily routine, how natural it felt to have her around. Orm's approach was subtle, patient. She never forced herself into Ling's personal space unnecessarily, never demanded attention. And yet with every small act of service, every carefully calculated glance or smile, she drew Ling further under her influence. Ling tried to maintain professional distance, but the moments were becoming increasingly difficult. She caught herself glancing at Orm while reviewing reports, her mind drifting to the hotel suite, to the touch of Orm's hands, to the heat she had felt. She hated that these thoughts intruded on her focus. Orm's audacity grew subtly. One afternoon, as Ling worked late in her office, Orm appeared carrying a stack of files. She set them down lightly on Ling's desk, then paused, letting her hand brush Ling's shoulder lightly, just enough to draw her attention. Ling's head snapped up, pulse racing. "Orm," she began, voice low, stern. Orm tilted her head, calm, unflinching, teasing. "I thought you might need a hand," she said softly, smiling faintly. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm confidence in Orm's tone, hated the subtle provocations that drew her in. She wanted to assert control, to command, to punish. Yet Orm's deliberate patience left her unsure, caught between irritation and desire. Orm lingered briefly, brushing a strand of hair from Ling's face as if testing boundaries, then stepped back, composed, calm, confident. Ling's hands clenched, heart racing. She hated how powerless she felt, and yet, she hated the thought of not feeling it. Later, in the evening, Ling returned home to find Orm preparing dinner. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the apartment, the table set meticulously, candles lit, everything arranged with precision and care. Orm glanced up as Ling entered. "Welcome home," Orm said softly, smiling faintly. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the quiet authority in that greeting, hated the calm, deliberate control Orm had begun to assert in her space. She wanted to assert dominance, but she found herself silently admiring the way Orm had seamlessly integrated herself into her life. "You didn't have to," Ling began. Orm cut her off softly. "I want to. Consider it a demonstration." Ling's brow furrowed slightly. "A demonstration of what?" Orm's lips curved faintly. "Of how I can be helpful," she said softly. "Of how I can serve without overstepping." Ling's pulse raced. The subtle teasing, the deliberate confidence, the quiet assertion of influence, it was maddening. She hated how easily Orm had integrated herself into her world, how calm and composed she remained even while testing boundaries. And yet, beneath the irritation, beneath the growing frustration, Ling felt an undeniable pull. She hated that she wanted it, that she was captivated, that Orm had already claimed her attention, her focus, and a small corner of her desire without a single overt act of domination. Part 2. The next morning, Orm arrived at Ling's office earlier than usual. She had prepared Ling's schedule, arranged all files neatly on the desk, and even brewed her coffee just the way she liked it. Hot, with a faint hint of cream, no sugar. Ling found herself noticing every detail, every careful gesture, every slight smile Orm offered drew her attention, tugging at the corners of her control. "Good morning," Orm said softly, placing the coffee cup in front of Ling with a delicate flourish. "I've organized the reports for your review. I also sorted the files from last week by priority." Ling's chest tightened. She hated the precise calm in Orm's voice, the way she moved with confidence and efficiency without seeming to exert any force. And yet, beneath the irritation, she couldn't help but admire it. "You didn't have to do this," Ling muttered, trying to sound professional, trying to reclaim some control. Orm tilted her head slightly, faint smile teasing. "I want to. Consider it part of my training," she said softly. "For the role you suggested?" Ling's jaw clenched. "Training?" The word struck a nerve. She hated that Orm was taking her words seriously, that she had already begun to act in ways she hadn't fully approved. And yet, as she sipped her coffee, she had to admit the efficiency, the thoughtfulness, the subtle care. It was intoxicating. Orm's subtlety became more daring as the week progressed. After office hours, she would linger, helping Ling sort through documents, tidying files, or organizing appointments. Sometimes she would brush Ling's shoulder lightly as she passed, or place a hand on the edge of the desk near hers, a subtle reminder of her presence. Ling noticed it all, every brush of skin, every faint scent of her perfume, every careful, deliberate smile. One afternoon, a junior executive made a light-hearted comment as he passed by Ling's office. Orm glanced up, smiled faintly, and engaged briefly, her response polite, calm, but undeniably charming. Ling felt her chest tighten, irritation and jealousy intertwining. She hated the calm authority in Orm's demeanor, hated the effortless way she drew attention, and yet she couldn't stop noticing. Orm returned to her tasks as if nothing had happened. Ling felt a rush of desire she hadn't expected. She hated that she was reacting, that she was caught in Orm's subtle game, that she wanted more despite herself. That evening, Orm arrived at Ling's apartment carrying the ingredients for dinner. She had prepared a full menu, a light salad, a perfectly seasoned main course, and a small dessert. Ling watched as Orm moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, every motion graceful, deliberate, calm. "You really didn't have to go to all this trouble," Ling muttered, leaning against the counter. Orm tilted her head slightly, a faint, teasing smile tugging at her lips. "I wanted to. You said a traditional wife should take care of you. Consider it a demonstration of my commitment to the role." Ling's pulse raced. The calm confidence, the teasing tone, the deliberate assumption of her duties. It was maddening. She hated the quiet assertion of control, hated the way Orm had integrated herself into her life, and yet she found herself drawn to it, captivated by it, powerless to resist the magnetic pull. Orm glanced at her, eyes steady, calm, teasing. "Would you like me to serve dinner or join me?" Ling's chest tightened. She hated that her mind immediately considered both options. She hated the way Orm's calm presence made her pulse race. She hated the subtle control Orm wielded without ever demanding it. Sit," Ling muttered finally, voice low, trying to maintain authority. Orm's lips curved faintly. "Of course." She served Ling with care, every gesture deliberate, every motion precise, each one designed to highlight both her competence and the subtle intimacy of the act. After dinner, Orm began cleaning the kitchen while Ling reviewed reports at the table. Her movements were quiet, graceful, deliberate. She paused occasionally, brushing Ling's shoulder as she reached for a dish, leaning slightly closer than necessary to pass a utensil. Ling felt her chest tighten with every small contact. She hated the subtle provocations, the teasing, the deliberate assertion of Orm's presence in her personal space. And yet, she found herself wanting it more than she wanted to admit. Orm glanced over her shoulder, eyes meeting Ling's. Calm, confident, teasing. Ling's pulse raced. She hated the power Orm already wielded over her, the way she could dominate without force, tease without words, and claim attention without asking. "Ms. Ling," Orm said softly, "may I bring your slippers?" She held them out politely, the faintest curve of a smile tugging at her lips. Ling exhaled sharply, hating how much the simple act made her heart race. "Yes," she said, voice low, almost a growl. Orm knelt briefly, placing the slippers neatly at Ling's feet. Her hand brushed Ling's ankle lightly, a calculated contact, a subtle assertion of presence. Ling's jaw clenched. She hated the warmth it brought, the shiver it elicited, the reminder of last night, the memory of every previous touch, every brush of skin, every deliberate glance. Orm straightened, calm, collected, smiling faintly. "Is there anything else you would like me to prepare or attend to?" Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm efficiency, the deliberate patience, the teasing authority in Orm's tone. She hated the way she felt drawn to answer, to request, to submit, even slightly. "I think that will be all for now," Ling said finally, trying to reclaim some sense of control. Orm inclined her head, calm, composed, poised. "Of course, Ms. Ling. I'm always here if you need me." Later that night, Ling reflected on the day's events. Orm had integrated herself seamlessly into her life, her apartment, her office, her routines, without a single overt demand. And yet, with every careful gesture, every subtle smile, every delicate touch, Orm had asserted influence, drawn attention, and claimed a corner of Ling's desire. Ling clenched her fists, frustrated, aroused, conflicted. She hated the subtle dominance, hated the growing dependency, hated the undeniable pull Orm had over her emotions and her mind. And yet, she couldn't deny it. She hated it and simultaneously wanted it more than she wanted to admit. Orm's housewife auditions were not overtly sexual, but they were provocations, subtle tests of boundaries, carefully calculated steps to assert influence. Ling realized, with a thrill that scared her, that she had already lost a small fraction of control, and she hated and simultaneously loved that fact. Part 3. The following morning, Ling returned to her office with a restless energy she couldn't shake. The conference, the suite, Orm's subtle, deliberate presence, All of it lingered like an echo she couldn't ignore. She tried to focus on reports, emails, and meetings, but her mind kept drifting back to Orm's careful touch, the way her hands had grazed her shoulder the night before, the subtle dominance in her calm, confident gaze. Orm entered silently, carrying a neatly organized stack of files. She set them down on Ling's desk, placing each one precisely in order of priority. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm authority in Orm's movements, hated the subtle way she had integrated herself into her workspace without a single word of demand. And yet, every precise gesture, every careful placement drew Ling further under her influence. Orm lingered near the edge of the desk, one hand brushing lightly against a file folder, intentionally close to Ling's arm. Ling's pulse spiked. She hated that she noticed it, hated that her body responded, hated that the deliberate, calculated teasing left her both frustrated and aroused. "Orm," Ling began, voice low, controlled, attempting to assert authority. "Focus on your tasks. Do not distract me." Orm tilted her head slightly, calm, composed, teasing. "Of course, Ms. Ling, but I thought perhaps a small encouragement might help you concentrate." Ling's jaw tightened. "Encouragement?" Orm smiled faintly, leaning slightly closer, her hand brushing the edge of Ling's forearm. Just enough to draw attention, just enough to spark desire, without overstepping. "Yes," she said softly. "A little motivation. You work best when inspired." Ling's chest tightened. She hated the subtle dominance, the quiet provocation, hated how easily Orm had claimed control without force, without words. Her mind screamed to push her away, to assert authority, to reclaim dominance. And yet, every nerve ending seemed alive, every instinct buzzing with tension she had never felt before. By mid-afternoon, the teasing became bolder. Ling was reviewing reports at her desk when Orm approached with a stack of papers. She knelt briefly under the desk to retrieve a dropped document, positioning herself close enough that Ling felt the warmth of her presence brush against her legs. Ling's pulse raced. "Orm," she muttered sharply, trying to maintain control. Orm tilted her head slightly, calm and composed, as if unaware of the effect she had. "Yes, Ms. Ling?" Ling's hands clenched into fists on the desk. She hated the teasing, hated the way her body responded, hated the way her mind betrayed her, knowing exactly what Orm was doing and yet unable to resist. Orm straightened, smiling faintly. "I thought it might be easier to pass the files directly," she said softly, her voice calm and deliberate. "Efficiency, you know?" Ling exhaled sharply, frustration mingling with desire. "Efficiency," she repeated, her tone low, almost growling. Orm's lips curved faintly. "Exactly," she said softly, calm, composed, teasing. That evening, Ling returned home to find Orm already preparing dinner again. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the apartment. The table was set meticulously, the dishes arranged with deliberate care. Orm glanced up, smiling faintly. "Welcome home," she said softly. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the quiet assertion of Orm's presence, the subtle authority in the way she organized her life, the deliberate, calm confidence that left Ling both frustrated and captivated. She hated the way she wanted it, the way she was drawn in, powerless to resist. Orm moved gracefully, arranging the plates, subtly brushing Ling's arm as she passed. Ling's pulse raced. She hated the teasing, the calculated intimacy, the deliberate intrusion into her personal space, and yet, every gesture made her heart pound, every glance made her shiver, every subtle touch ignited desire she hadn't anticipated. "Orm," Ling said finally, voice low, controlled. "Enough teasing. Sit. Eat." Orm inclined her head, calm, composed. "Of course," she said softly, sliding into the chair across from Ling. After dinner, Orm began tidying the kitchen quietly. Ling returned to the living room with her laptop, attempting to focus on emails, but her mind kept drifting. She noticed the way Orm moved, the deliberate grace in every gesture, the calm confidence that left Ling's chest tight. She hated the way she was captivated, frustrated, and aroused all at once. Orm approached, kneeling briefly to retrieve a dropped utensil, positioning herself close to Ling's feet. Ling's pulse spiked. She hated the teasing, hated the calculated intimacy, hated how easily Orm had claimed a corner of her attention. Orm straightened, calm, composed, smiling faintly. "I thought you might want a little comfort," she said softly, brushing a stray hair from Ling's hand as she passed. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm dominance, the subtle provocations, the deliberate, teasing presence. She hated that she was reacting, that every instinct betrayed her, that Orm had already begun asserting control without overt force. And yet she wanted it. She wanted it more than she would admit. Finally, Ling could no longer restrain herself. She pushed back, not with words alone, but with action. She grabbed Orm lightly by the wrist, pulling her gently closer, voice low, firm. "Orm," she said, almost growling, "you're pushing too far. Don't think I won't punish you." Orm tilted her head slightly, eyes steady, lips curved faintly. "And what form would that punishment take?" she asked softly, calm, teasing. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the challenge in Orm's voice, hated the subtle provocation, hated the way her mind and body betrayed her. And yet, she felt a thrill at the idea, a spark of desire that ignited attention she couldn't ignore. Orm leaned slightly closer, voice soft, deliberate. "I hope it's thorough." Ling exhaled sharply, pulse racing. She hated and simultaneously desired the way Orm had already claimed control without a single overt act of domination. She realized with a mixture of frustration and longing that Orm had passed the first real test of her housewife auditions. She had asserted influence, provoked desire, and left Ling powerless to resist, all without crossing a single explicit boundary. Part 4. Ling's chest tightened as she watched Orm approach, calm, deliberate, carrying the dishes to the sink. Every movement was precise, controlled, yet teasing in the faintest way. Ling's hands clenched slightly. She hated the subtle dominance in Orm's confidence, hated the way her body reacted to each calculated motion, hated that she wanted it. "Orm," Ling said, voice low, controlled, trying to regain some authority. "Come here." Orm tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Calm, collected, teasing, exactly as always. "Yes, Ms. Ling?" Ling's chest tightened further. She hated how easy it was for Orm to command attention without demanding it, how she had already claimed a small corner of Ling's focus and desire. And yet she felt the undeniable pull, the thrill, the tension, the slow burn of desire that had been simmering all week. "Enough teasing," Ling said finally, stepping closer. "You've been pushing boundaries for days. You need to learn what happens when rules are broken." Orm's lips curved faintly. "And what does that entail?" she asked softly, calm, deliberate. Ling's pulse raced. She hated the challenge in Orm's voice, the subtle provocation, the quiet assertion of control, and yet it thrilled her. Every instinct in her body screamed with a mixture of frustration and anticipation. "You'll see," Ling said finally, voice low, almost growling, stepping closer. Orm followed without hesitation, calm, poised, confident. She allowed Ling to guide her gently to the couch. Ling's hands rested lightly on Orm's shoulders, the faintest pressure, enough to assert authority without force. Orm leaned slightly into the contact, a subtle invitation, teasing, testing, compliant yet deliberately challenging. Ling's mind raced. She hated the thrill, hated the desire, hated the undeniable tension that crackled between them, and yet she couldn't stop herself. She needed to assert control, to deliver the first real consequence for Orm's audacity. With a measured hand, Ling guided Orm forward, positioning her over her lap. Orm's eyes flicked up to meet hers, calm, steady, teasing. Ling's pulse raced. She hated the challenge in Orm's gaze, hated the deliberate confidence, hated that her body reacted with desire to the prospect of punishment. "Do you understand why you're here?" Ling asked, voice low, controlled. Orm's lips curved faintly. To be disciplined? She asked softly. Yes, Ling replied firmly. To learn boundaries, to understand the consequences of pushing them. Orm tilted her head, lips teasing, calm, confident. I understand. Ling's hand came down in a controlled motion, firm, deliberate, precise. Orm tensed slightly, a shiver running through her, but she didn't flinch away. Her compliance was deliberate, her poise intact, even under the subtle pressure of Ling's control. You're insufferable, Ling muttered under her breath, not entirely in anger, her voice low, steady, and yet completely captivating. Orm's lips curved faintly. I hope this helps, she whispered softly, calm, teasing. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm provocation, hated the deliberate teasing, hated that Orm had already claimed influence over her desires. And yet, she couldn't stop. She needed to assert control, to establish boundaries, to test her own restraint. Her hand moved again, firm, measured, delivering another controlled reminder of authority. Orm's breathing remained steady, composed, yet there was a faint thrill in her eyes, a spark that ignited the tension further. Ling hated the way her body betrayed her. She hated the heat, the desire, the undeniable pull that Orm elicited with every subtle gesture. After a few moments, Ling paused, hands resting lightly on Orm's shoulders. She exhaled sharply, pulse racing. The thrill of authority, the tension, the subtle psychological play, it was intoxicating. Orm leaned slightly into her, lips brushing against Ling's arm softly, deliberately teasing. Am I forgiven? She asked, calm, composed, almost innocent. Ling's chest tightened. She hated the calm authority, hated the subtle challenge, hated how easily Orm had drawn her under her influence, and yet she found herself wanting to grant it, wanting to indulge in the delicate tension, wanting to let Orm feel the thrill of compliance while maintaining the delicate balance of authority. Yes, Ling murmured finally, voice low, almost a growl. You're forgiven, for now, but do not forget, rules exist for a reason. Orm's lips curved faintly. I won't forget, she whispered softly. Her eyes sparkled faintly, calm, composed, teasing. Ling hated how easy it was for Orm to assert influence without overt force, how she had claimed a small corner of her focus, her attention, her desire, without ever demanding it. Afterward, Ling stepped back, breathing slightly heavy, heart racing. She hated the thrill, the tension, the subtle pull Orm had on her mind and body, and yet she couldn't stop noticing, couldn't stop feeling, couldn't stop wanting. Orm had tested boundaries, breached walls, asserted influence, and left her captivated, all without overtly crossing any line. Orm straightened, calm, poised, smiling faintly. Am I in good standing? She asked softly. Ling exhaled sharply, pulse still racing. She hated the calm authority, the deliberate teasing, the way Orm had claimed control, and yet, she smiled faintly. Yes, she said finally, you are in good standing. For now. Orm's lips curved in a subtle, satisfied smile, calm, confident, teasing. Ling hated and simultaneously loved the quiet assertion of influence, the subtle power play, the way Orm had already claimed a corner of her desire without overt force. That night, Ling lay in her bedroom staring at the ceiling. She hated the lingering heat, the undeniable pull of desire, the subtle authority Orm had exerted throughout the day. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop remembering every controlled movement, every deliberate glance, every teasing gesture. Orm had begun her housewife auditions, and she had succeeded beyond Ling's expectations. Subtle, calm, deliberate, teasing, and confident, Orm had asserted influence, provoked desire, and claimed a space in Ling's life without ever demanding it. Ling hated the thrill, the tension, the undeniable pull, and yet she wanted it more than she would admit. Orm had passed the first real test. Ling knew the next step would only escalate the tension further, push boundaries further, and test the limits of her restraint. And she hated, and simultaneously loved, the fact that she could not resist Orm, could not resist the pull, the tease, the subtle dominance that had already claimed a part of her attention, her mind, her desire. And she knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same.